He told the old man to leave and go find a shelter at the front door of the restaurant the old man secretly owned. Before we dive in, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from tonight? Drop your city below so we can see how far this story travels. And if you love cinematic stories with real emotions and shocking twists, subscribe to Beyond Stories and stay with us until the end. The way this nobody turns an entire empire upside down is not what anyone in that dining room expects. It starts on a cold night in Chicago, at the entrance of the Meridian Crown. Gregory Cole stood at the host stand in a flawless suit, the picture of polite control. His smile disappeared in the moment he saw the man in front of him. The man's coat hung off his thin frame. The fabric was worn shiny at the elbows. A gray knit cap was pulled low over his hair. His boots were scuffed, his fingers red from the wind. Behind him, the lobby was full of people wrapped in expensive wool and perfume, talking softly about flights, numbers, and weekend plans. As soon as they saw him, the sound changed. It thinned, like someone had turned down the volume. "Good evening," the old man said quietly. "I'd like a table for one." Gregory's professional smile snapped back on, but his eyes were already hard. "I'm afraid we're fully booked, sir," he said. "The Meridian Crown is reservation only." The old man glanced past him. Through the glass and light, he could see empty tables waiting under white cloth and candlelight. "You have seats," he said. "I can pay." There was no drama in his voice, no complaining, just a calm statement of fact. Gregory took a small step closer, lowering his tone. "There's a community kitchen a few blocks south," he said. "They're better equipped for situations like this. Tonight, we're at capacity." A woman in diamonds leaned toward her partner. "How did he get in here?" she whispered. A man in a navy blazer checked his watch with an exaggerated sigh. A couple simply moved one step farther away, as if distance could erase him from the room. The old man stayed where he was. "I'd still like a table," he replied. "Just dinner, for one." For the first time, he lifted his head fully. The lobby lights hit his glasses. Behind the thick, smudged lenses, his eyes were surprisingly clear. Not lost, not confused, just watching. "Is there a problem here?" another voice asked. The restaurant manager approached, stress already visible in the tight line of his mouth. He took in the scene in a heartbeat. Gregory, the old coat, the cluster of waiting guests. "We're packed," Gregory said smoothly. "I've explained, but he won't leave." The manager's eyes flicked into the dining room. He saw what the old man had seen. Empty tables, polished glassware, soft music. He hesitated. "We don't want a scene at the door," he muttered under his breath. "Seat him in the back, by the kitchen. Get him in and out fast." Gregory stared at him. "Seriously? One cover isn't going to hurt us," the manager said. "Just keep him away from the main floor." Then, louder, with a thin smile, "Sir, we can accommodate you briefly. Gregory will show you to a table." The old man inclined his head. "Thank you," he said. He didn't look grateful. He didn't look offended. He just looked tired. Gregory's fingers closed around his elbow, a little too tight. "This way," he said. They walked past the host stand into the warm light of the Meridian Crown. Plates clinked, glasses caught the chandeliers. A piano played somewhere just out of sight. A few conversations dipped as they passed, then hurried to recover. The old man said nothing. Once more, the light hit his glasses. His eyes, behind the smudge and glare, were the same, calm, alert, taking everything in. At the back of the dining room, Gregory turned into a narrow hallway by the kitchen doors, the place where the smell of detergent drowned out truffle and wine. "Here," he said, stopping beside a cramped two-top by the swinging door. The tablecloth was wrinkled. No candle, no water. "You can sit here. Someone will be with you when they have a moment." The old man rested a hand on the back of the chair, but didn't sit right away. His gaze moved slowly over the restaurant he had just walked through, the laughing tables, the full bar, the guests who had already forgotten he existed. For a brief second, his jaw tightened. This was his world in miniature, exactly as he feared, exactly as he had built it. 12 hours earlier, that same man had stood somewhere else. That morning, he wore a charcoal suit in the corner office on the 62nd floor of Aurora Meridian Tower. His name then was Kenjiro Haynes, chairman and CEO, listening as his cardiologist quietly warned him that his heart might not reach another birthday if he kept living at full speed. When the doctor left, he looked down at the city he owned but did not feel part of, and decided that that night he would walk into his own restaurant dressed as a nobody, just to see whether anyone there could still treat a stranger like a person. Gregory's grip on the old man's elbow said more than his words. From a distance it looked like service. Up close it felt like being moved out of sight. They crossed the dining room in a thin bubble of quiet. Conversations dipped. A woman adjusted her chair to give them space that wasn't really needed. A man in a blazer folded his arms, as if that could keep the worn coat from touching him. A teenager looked up, curious, until his father cleared his throat. "This will do," Gregory said. They had reached the far edge of the restaurant, where the carpet ended and the music thinned. Beside the swinging kitchen door, almost pressed against a metal service station, stood a tiny two-person table. No cloth, no candle, no water, just a bare, slightly sticky surface. Gregory pulled the chair out. "You can sit here," he said. "Someone will be by when they have a moment." The old man looked at the table. No one paid Meridian's prices to sit here. This was where you put what you didn't want the room to see, but couldn't quite throw away. He lowered himself into the chair. "Thank you," he replied. Gregory turned and walked back toward the glow of the main floor, already smiling again by the time he reached the first full table. The old man folded his hands and waited. The kitchen door swung open with a soft bang. Heat and the shout of a cook rolled over him, then vanished. A server carrying plates pivoted around his table without looking down. A busser with a cart of dirty dishes let his eyes catch the old coat for half a second, then fixed them on the floor. He might as well have been an empty chair. Across the room, a burst of laughter floated above the piano. Under the largest chandelier, a man in a pale gray suit finished a story, his watch catching the light. Edward Harrington. Around him, the staff moved fast and easy, refilling bread, topping off glasses, taking orders before hands even went up. The old man watched as Harrington raised 2 fingers. Gregory appeared almost instantly, shoulders slightly bent. "Mr. Harrington," he said, "we have a special from the chef tonight I think you'll enjoy." The scene was how this place was supposed to work. The old man let it fade back into noise and looked down at his own bare table. He knew, better than anyone, what nights like this meant on paper. How many dinners, how many bottles of wine, how many full tables they needed to keep the numbers beautiful. He knew all of it because he had signed off on it himself. Tonight, none of that mattered. The kitchen door banged again. For a moment, his reflection flashed in the small round window. Old coat, knit cap, thick glasses. Behind them, a face that didn't quite belong to any of these tables. Another picture pushed up from memory. A narrow New York kitchen, a table crowded with papers, a boy in a too big jacket trying to stand straight. On the table lay a small metal crest, dark from age, stamped with a many-petaled flower. His mother had said it there gently. "It is our family mark," she had said in Japanese, then again in careful English. "It tells you where you come from." His father had picked it up, turned it once, and set it down near the edge. "We're not in Kyoto," his father had said. "Haynes. That's the name we use here. Short, strong. Everyone can say it. You want a future in this city? You don't lead with that. You hide it. You outwork everyone. You get harder than they are. Hide it. Work twice as hard. Become stone." Decades later, the man who had followed that rule sat at the worst table in his own restaurant with that same crest in his pocket. He slid a hand into his coat and closed his fingers around it. The metal was smooth now, edges softened by years of being turned over whenever his thoughts wandered where he didn't want them to go. The flower was barely visible. His mother's world hadn't vanished. He had sealed it away. Aurora Meridian's cultural arm owned a vast collection of Japanese art. Scrolls, woodblock prints, tea bowls, lacquer. On paper, it was priceless. In real life, it lived in a warehouse with perfect air and perfect filing systems, visited mostly by appraisers and mentioned mostly in tax meetings. Reports reached his desk with neat lists: date, condition, estimated value. He could not remember the last time he had seen a line about why any of it mattered. The kitchen door thudded shut again. Still no menu, still no water. He drew his hand back and rested it on the table. There was the familiar tightness in his chest Dr. Morales had warned him about that morning. Beneath it sat another weight, colder and heavier. This was what he had built, a network of glass and steel where men like Harrington were treated like royalty. And anyone who looked like his mother's father would be gently pointed somewhere else. He glanced up as a young server passed. The man's gaze skimmed past his table, like it was a column, then brightened when a group in designer suits waved him over for dessert. He checked the small clock over the bar. Nearly 20 minutes, no greeting, no smile, not even a glass of water. If no one here can see me, he thought, the words settling like a verdict, there is nothing here worth saving. Not the restaurant people bragged about entering, not the tower with his initials, not the web of companies and accounts other people called a legacy. 10 more slow minutes slipped past. To the guests, he became part of the background, something eyes slid over on the way to more interesting sights. To the staff, he was an inconvenience they hoped would vanish on its own. To Kenjiro Haynes, sitting alone at the worst table in the house with a hidden crest in his pocket, it was something different. It was the last quiet test he was willing to give the world. And so far, the world was failing it. Across the city, another day was ending. Maya Ito snapped her laptop shut as the campus library lights flickered their first warning. Her screen had been filled with images of old symbols, floral crests carved into lacquer, stamped in bronze, painted onto silk banners that had survived centuries of rain and war, family emblems, stories turned into shapes. Her thesis draft title still glowed faintly in her mind: Kintsugi, Kinship, and the Persistence of Memory, Japanese family crests in a broken world. Her phone buzzed before she could slide it into her bag. Westlake Neurology lit up the screen. Her stomach tightened. She answered. "Hello? Miss Ito, this is Karen from billing. I'm calling about your mother's treatment plan." Maya shifted the strap of her backpack onto her shoulder. "Hi. Yes. Is everything okay?" "The doctor would like to keep her on the current course of therapy. It's showing encouraging response," Karen said. "But the next cycle begins Monday, and there's still an outstanding balance from last month. We do need to settle a portion of that before we can proceed." "How much?" Maya asked quietly. She heard paper shuffle. "Your insurance covered part of it. The remaining balance is just over 12,000. The word "just" landed like a stone. 12,000, Maya repeated, tasting each syllable. Her brain did the math without asking her permission. Her rent, her part-time pay from the restaurant, the loans already creeping up around her ankles. "We have some options," Karen added, "payment plans, but we do need a commitment on record." Maya closed her eyes for a heartbeat. Her mother's hands flashed through her mind, once steady around a teacup, now sometimes shaking as she tried to button a coat. "I'll find a way," Maya said. "Please don't interrupt the treatments. I'll come by tomorrow and talk to someone, all right?" "We'll make a note," Karen replied, and the call ended with polite goodbyes that didn't match the weight of what had just been dropped into Maya's day. She stayed still for a moment in the quiet aisle between shelves. Then she straightened, slipped the phone into her pocket, and walked out into the cold. There was no time to linger. She had a shift. By 7 o'clock, the world of textbooks and archives had been replaced by another universe entirely. Polished brass, wine glasses that caught every light, and a host stand that felt more like a border checkpoint than a welcome. The Meridian Crown. Maya tied her apron in the narrow staff corridor, fingers moving from habit. Her hair was already pulled back. Her black shoes, once decent, now showed the creases of long nights on hard floors. "Evening, Maya," one of the line cooks called as he slid pans onto the stove. "Hey," she said, mustering a smile. Gregory didn't look up when she passed the host stand. He was busy arranging his seating chart like it was a puzzle only he understood. "Runner tonight?" he asked, eyes still on the screen. "Runner," she confirmed. "Good. Stay close to the floor. Water first, then bread. No chatting. Keep the main servers free for the high-value tables. Got it?" "Got it," Maya replied. He didn't ask how she was. He didn't need to. In his world, there were only two categories: people you served and people who served. Within minutes, she was moving. Fill the water glasses at table 4. Drop bread at table 6. Clear the empty plates from 9 before dessert. Smile, "Thank you, you're welcome, of course." Her steps traced a quiet pattern between wealth and hunger she knew too well. She caught fragments of conversation as she moved. A deal closing, a flight to Tokyo, a school application. None of it had anything to do with $12,000 of medical bills or the price of a single shift lost. Guests looked up when she arrived at their table and looked away as soon as their glasses were full. She didn't take it personally, not anymore. The first month she worked here, it had stung. Now it was just part of the choreography. Still, she sometimes imagined what it would be like if someone looked at her long enough to see more than the apron. In a slow stretch between courses, she ducked into the kitchen, balancing a tray of empty plates on her shoulder. Inside, the air was hotter, full of steam and the fast language of tickets and timing. The manager stood near the pass, signing something on a clipboard. Gregory leaned against the counter, voice low but sharp. "I told you, he's at table 23, Gregory said. "Just leave him, no menus, no fuss, he'll feel uncomfortable and go." "The older gentleman?" the manager asked. "Gentleman," Gregory scoffed. "He walked in here like he got lost on his way to a shelter. Coat's older than I am. Our regulars don't need to see that while they're trying to enjoy their evening." Maya set the tray down and reached for a cloth, listening despite herself. "So, no one's serving that table?" the manager asked, distracted. "Why would we?" Gregory replied. "He's not on the books, he doesn't fit the room, and I guarantee he can't afford a main course, let alone a bottle. We're not a charity. If we ignore him, he'll get the hint and leave." There was no malice in his tone, just certainty. "Focus on Harrington and the usuals," he added. "They actually keep this place running." The manager nodded, already turning away to sign another form. Maya's hand tightened around the cloth. Through the small diamond-shaped window in the swinging door, she could see a slice of the dining room. She stepped closer. Table 23 sat right at the edge of her view. She saw the old coat first, the knit cap, the way the man sat perfectly upright, hands folded neatly in front of him on a bare table. His gaze rested on nothing in particular, as if he were trying not to disturb the air itself. He wasn't talking to anyone. He wasn't waving for attention. He was just waiting. For a moment, everything else in the kitchen blurred. The clang of pans, the hiss of steam, Gregory's running commentary, all of it slid to the edges. The image through the window shifted into another. Her grandfather near the end, sitting on a bench in the park 2 blocks from their old apartment, coat buttoned wrong, hat a little crooked. People walked past. Some smiled politely. Most didn't see him at all. Maya had sat beside him, legs not touching the ground, listening to his stories about rivers and mountains in a country she had never seen. When his hands had started to tremble, he'd laughed it off. When his words began to tangle, people around them spoke slower and louder, as if the problem was his ears and not their patience. In the last months, she had watched something she couldn't name happen. He didn't disappear. But somehow, the world stopped noticing he was there. Her chest tightened, with the same helpless ache now, right there in the bright, expensive kitchen behind a door. "Runner!" one of the senior servers called. "Water at table 8, please." Maya blinked and stepped back from the window. "On it," she said. She grabbed a tray and moved automatically, filling glasses at table 8, then 9, answering a quick question about the bread. But as she turned to reach for another pitcher, her eyes slid back toward the door. Through the small glass pane, she could still see the outline of the man at table 23, hands folded, back straight, no water, no menu, no one headed his way. A familiar voice in her mind whispered the rule every server had drilled into her: focus on the tables that tip. Another voice, quieter but older, spoke in her grandfather's accent. A person is still a person, even when the world is busy. Maya's fingers tightened around the handle of the pitcher. Somewhere between those two voices, a choice began to form. "Runner!" Gregory's voice snapped through the kitchen. Maya looked up. He stood at the pass with a silver ice bucket and a dark bottle resting in it. "Harrington's Bordeaux," he said. "Table 12, he wants it now. And Maya?" "Yes?" "No detours tonight," Gregory added. "We serve paying guests, not stories. Got it?" "Got it," she said. She took the bucket and pushed through the swinging door. Out in the dining room, music and candlelight softened everything. She moved towards the table 12 where Edward Harrington sat with his colleagues. On the way, her eyes slid, almost by reflex, to the very back. Table 23. The old man sat there, shoulders straight, coat still buttoned. His hands were folded on an empty tabletop. No glass, no menu, no bread. Maya's steps slowed. Harrington was still mid-story, waving one hand. No one at table 12 was looking for her yet. She could walk on and pretend she hadn't seen. Or she could stop. She veered to a side station, set the bucket down, then crossed to table 23. "Good evening, sir," she said. The old man looked up, surprised. Behind the thick lenses, his eyes were sharper than the rest of him suggested. "I realize no one has brought you anything to drink," she said. "That shouldn't happen to any guest. May I start you with some water?" He studied her face as if searching for the joke. "Yes," he said slowly. "Water would be appreciated." Right away, she answered. She pulled a fresh napkin from her apron and smoothed it over the table, hiding sticky rings. Then she stepped back into the side station, filled a clean glass with chilled water, and came right back. She set it in front of him. "Here you are," she said. "Please sip it. The draft by this door can sneak up on you." He wrapped his fingers around the glass. She noticed the faint tremor in his hand. He took a sip. A bit of color returned to his face. "Have you been outside long?" Maya asked. "A while," he said. "The cold likes to linger," she replied. "If you'd like, I can bring something warm first. A small soup, some tea." "I haven't ordered," he said. "Then let's call this a welcome, not an order," she said. "We have a good green tea. May I bring you a pot and a small bowl of soup? I'll talk to the kitchen." "You are very direct," he murmured. "It's harder for me to ignore someone who looks cold," she said. "So, may I?" He held her gaze for a moment. "Yes," he said at last. "Tea and soup, if you insist." "I do," Maya replied. "I'll be back in a moment, sir." She reclaimed the ice bucket, walked to table 12, and let her practiced smile slide into place. "Mr. Harrington, thank you for your patience," she said, presenting the label and pouring. He nodded, without really looking at her. As soon as the glass was full, she slipped back into the kitchen. At the tea station, she measured a pitaru, small spoonful of green tea leaves into a pot. She watched the kettle, pulling it off the heat just before the water boiled, then poured. Near the line, she filled a small bowl with clear broth, added a few vegetables, and a slice of tofu. Nothing fancy, just warmth. She placed pot, cup, soup, and a thin slice of lemon on a tray, took a breath, and went back out. Table 23 waited at the edge of everything. The old man sat as before, but his eyes followed the tray now. "I hope you don't mind that I brought the soup," she said. "Consider it an apology for the wait." "A generous apology," he replied. She set the bowl down, then the teapot, then the cup. The bare corner of the restaurant became, finally, a real table. As she adjusted the tray, his left hand slipped into his coat pocket. His fingers found the small disc of metal he kept there. He turned it the way he always did when the world felt colder than the air. Once. Twice. On the third turn, it slipped. The crest slid out of his fingers and dropped onto the napkin with a soft tap. Maya's eyes flicked down. It was small and dark from age, the edges smooth. On its face, a stylized flower still showed. Layered leaves, curling stems, a pattern she had traced in textbooks and museum catalogs for months. Her heart stopped for a single beat. His hand shot out, covering it. "It's nothing," he said quickly. "Just an old habit." She lifted her gaze back to his. Now he was watching her in a different way, waiting to see if she would turn his private symbol into a test or a performance. She didn't. She didn't ask what it was. She didn't say she recognized it. She set the teapot back on the tray for a moment. "I understand," she said softly. Then she took half a step back from the table. Her arms rested straight at her sides, her feet planted on the carpet. In a room where staff bowed only to money and status, Maya Ito did something she had only practiced in studios and lecture halls. She bowed. A calm, deliberate bow from the waist, her back straight, her gaze lowered for a breath. Not to his coat, not to his apparent poverty, but to the history pressed into that small piece of metal and to the person who carried it. When she straightened, she met his eyes again. "It is an honor to serve you tonight, sir," she said. From the side station, Gregory saw it. The girl in the plain apron bowing to the shabby old man at table 23 as if he were royalty. His smile froze. He crossed the room in 3 quick steps. "Maya," he said, voice tight but quiet. "Step over here a moment." She glanced at the old man. "Excuse me, sir," she murmured, then let Gregory steer her into the narrow space beside the bar. The moment they were out of sight, his tone snapped. "What was that?" he demanded. "What was what?" she asked. "The bow, the tea, the way you abandoned table 12 so you could fuss over a man in a coat that belongs in the donation bin," Gregory said. "Harrington is sitting with an empty glass while you play hero in the corner." "He's a guest," Maya replied. "He walked in like everyone else. He was shaking and didn't even have water." Gregory laughed once, without warmth. "You really don't understand how this works," he said. "Some guests pay the bills. Some guests take up space. Harrington spends more here in a month than that man will see in a year. It costs almost nothing to treat him decently," she said. "It costs a lot more to pretend it doesn't matter." "It might cost us Harrington," Gregory shot back. and Harrington is not optional. Before she could answer, a calm voice drifted from behind them. "If I'm going to be the subject of this conversation," the old man said, "perhaps I should be allowed to take part." They turned. He had left his chair and stood by table 23, one hand on the back of it. The tea Maya had brought still steamed. The small metal crest lay beside the cup. "My apologies for interrupting," he said, "but since I seem to be the problem, allow me to help solve it. I would like to order." Gregory's professional mask returned. "Of course, sir," he said smoothly. "What were you thinking of having?" The old man looked at Maya. "If Miss Ito is still permitted to write it down," he said, "I'll have the Imperial tasting menu. Full sequence. Add the Wagyu upgrade and the soba, and bring a bottle of the 1985 La Fleur from your reserve cellar." Maya knew the prices. The number made her stomach flip. "Just so we're clear," Gregory said, "that bottle alone is over $8,000. "I can read your list," the old man replied. "Is there a reason you're not taking out your pad?" Nearby conversation sank to a hush. "My job is to protect this restaurant," Gregory said. "Sometimes people order beyond their means. It gets awkward." "So, you don't believe I can pay?" the old man summarized. "I believe this isn't the place for experiments," Gregory answered. Before he could say more, a sharp snap of fingers cut across the room. "Runner!" Harrington, half turned in his chair at table 12, one hand raised, his voice carrying. "I've been sitting here with an empty glass," he called. "Am I funding a charity shift, or is anyone actually working tonight?" A thin laugh flickered and died. Maya walked over. "Mr. Harrington," she said, "I'm sorry for the wait. Your wine is ready. I'll pour it now." He snapped his fingers again, closer. "No," he said. "What you'll do is come when I call. That's how this works. I don't spend this kind of money to watch you play social worker with the man in the back." The words stung, but her voice stayed steady. "I understand you're frustrated, sir," she said, "and I am sorry you had to wait. But please don't snap your fingers at me. If you need something, say my name or raise your hand. I'll come as fast as I can. I'm here to serve you, not to be treated like a button." The dining room went quiet. "Do you know how much I spend here?" he demanded. "I bring partners, clients, everyone. This place lives off my dinners, and you decide to correct me?" Gregory appeared at her side. "Mr. Harrington, she didn't mean—" "I meant it," Maya said quietly. "Respect can go both ways." Harrington turned from her to Gregory. "If she is not fired," he said, voice low but clear, "right now, in front of me, I move every dinner, every event, every dollar somewhere else." "Mr. Harrington, please, we can—" Gregory began. "This is simple," Harrington cut in. "Show me you understand who matters in this room, or I go." Gregory's eyes flicked to Harrington, then to Maya, then toward the back corner where the old man watched. Fear chose for him. He turned fully to Maya. "I warned you," he said, voice rising. "You were hired to follow instructions, not to lecture guests. You want to make speeches? Do it somewhere else." His next words were flat and final. "You're done. Maya Ito, you're fired. Effective immediately. Take off your apron, collect your things, and leave my floor." For a heartbeat, everything inside her went hollow. Then she untied her apron, folded it, and set it on the side station. "I understand," she said softly. She turned toward the staff corridor, then paused and looked back at table 23. "I'm sorry I couldn't finish your service, sir," she told the old man. "I hope the tea still helps." He didn't speak, but the weariness had slipped from his face. His eyes were sharp, fixed on Maya, on Gregory, on Harrington, as if a line had finally been crossed. One hand rested on the metal crest, pressing it gently into the table. In that quiet pressure, a decision settled. Maya didn't feel her feet as she walked. The noise of the restaurant blurred into a distant hum. Her vision tunneled on the service corridor door, the little silver plaque that meant staff only. The place you disappeared through when you didn't belong out here anymore. Her hands were empty. Her apron was gone. Her name tag felt suddenly too heavy on her chest. She could taste salt before she realized she was crying. Images collided in her mind. The hospital hallway smell, her mother's shaky handwriting on a consent form, the balance on the clinic portal that never went down far enough. The calculator app where every number began with minus. The hope that at least this job, this one stressful, exhausting job, would hold everything together a little longer. And now Gregory's voice echoed over all of it. "You're done. You're fired." She swallowed hard, shoulders collapsing in on themselves. She didn't want to give the dining room the show of watching her break. "I'm sorry," she had told the old man. "I hope the tea still helps." It was all she had left to give. She took one more step toward the corridor. Stop. The word was not loud. It didn't crack like a shout or ring like a command on a movie set. It landed in the room at a normal volume, but it carried something in it that made every conversation, every clink of glass, every piece of cutlery simply pause. Maya froze mid-step. So did Gregory. So did Harrington, halfway through adjusting his cufflinks in self-satisfaction. Slowly, the entire restaurant turned toward the back corner. The old man at table 23 was no longer sitting. He had risen to his full height. The slight stoop was gone as if it had never been real. He stood with his shoulders square, his weight balanced as if he owned not just the space around his table, but the floor beneath everyone's feet. He reached up, removed the thick glasses, and set them beside the small metal crest. Without them, his eyes were startlingly clear. They swept the room once, calm and cutting, and people nearest to him stepped back a pace without knowing why. Maya turned fully toward him, her breath stuck in her chest. Gregory tried to find his voice. "Sir," he began, forcing a thin smile, "I must ask you to—" "Mr. Lane," the old man said. Gregory stopped. No one used his last name out here. Not guests, not staff, not like that. "You have just dismissed a member of your team," the old man continued, "in front of an entire room of strangers for the crime of doing what you are all supposed to do here. Serve." His tone was even. That somehow made every word feel heavier. "Sir, with respect, you don't understand the situation," Gregory said. "She disrespected a key client. Mr. Harrington is a man who snaps his fingers at people as if they were remote controls," the old man said, looking briefly at Harrington. "Yes, I heard." A few guests shifted in their chairs, suddenly, very interested in their napkins. "You," the old man went on, turning back to Gregory, "saw a choice tonight. You could stand behind the one person in this room who treated a stranger with basic humanity, or you could protect the comfort of someone who treats your staff as furniture." He tilted his head slightly. "You chose the wallet. You stepped on the only person here who understands the word service as anything more than a number on a bill." Gregory's jaw clenched. "This is a private matter between management and staff," he said. "You are a guest, sir. You are not involved." "Incorrect," the old man replied softly. "I am very involved." He took a step forward. The lights caught the angles of his face differently now. The coat and scuffed shoes still hung on his frame, but around them was a presence that refused to be hidden. It was in the way he held his hands, the unhurried way he spoke, the absolute lack of fear in his eyes. Maya realized she had unconsciously taken a step back toward him, away from the door. "You looked at me when I walked in," the old man said to Gregory. "You saw only what you thought I could pay. You saw problem, not person. You decided how much respect I deserved before I opened my mouth." His gaze swept at the nearest tables, and when Maya broke that pattern for 1 minute, when she chose to treat an old man like a human instead of a warning sign, you punished her for it. You didn't correct her in private. You performed her humiliation in front of every set of eyes in this room, because one man with money demanded it. Harrington shifted, color rising in his neck. "Now, wait just a second," he began. The old man didn't even look at him. "This is what you are proud of guarding, Mr. Lane?" he asked quietly. "A culture where kindness is an error and arrogance is the house style?" Gregory's mouth opened and closed once. "This is a fine dining establishment," he said finally. "We have standards. We can't afford—" "Standards," the old man repeated. "Yes, let us discuss standards." He reached into the pocket of his worn coat. For a second, Maya thought he was going to take out the crest again. Instead, his hand emerged with a phone, not just any phone, sleek, unreleased, one of the new prototypes every tech blog had been speculating about for weeks. A couple at a nearby table exchanged looks, recognizing it instantly. He unlocked it with a flick of his thumb and scrolled to a single contact. The name on the screen, visible to the nearest diners, read, Elliot Crane. He pressed call and lifted it to his ear. "Elliot," he said, his voice dropping into a tone that was suddenly all authority and no apology. "It's me. I'm at the Meridian Crown." A beat of silence. "No," he continued. Not in the private room. In the main dining hall. I need you here, now. A few heads turned toward the entrance, as if expecting the doors to open immediately. Bring security, he added, and the folder we discussed last quarter. You'll understand when you see it. He ended the call and slid the phone back into his pocket, with the ease of a man who gave instructions for a living and was rarely questioned. Around the room, pieces began quietly sliding into place in people's minds. The unreleased device, the way he said Elliot like someone used to being listened to, the unshaken calm in his posture, the fact that he didn't look like a man bluffing for show. At one table, a hedge fund manager who prided himself on knowing every major player in town leaned toward his partner and whispered, "Did he say Crane, as in Haynes and Dew?" Crane? His partner's eyes widened. "No way," she mouthed. In the middle of the floor, Maya stood frozen, tears still drying on her cheeks, watching the strange transformation of the man she'd bowed to. He glanced her way, and for a moment the steel in his expression softened. "Maya," he said, quietly enough that the room had to strain to hear, "please don't move another step until Mr. Crane arrives." Gregory bristled. "You don't have the right to give orders to my staff," he snapped. The old man looked at him, almost pitying. "You're going to find," he said, "that my relationship with this place is a little more complicated than guessed." He returned his gaze to the room, to the chandeliers, to the line of polished glass behind the bar, to the name gleaming on the menu covers. For the first time that night, Kenjiro Haynes let himself stand, not as a forgotten stranger in a borrowed coat, but as the man who had built the empire that made this room possible. And everyone watching could feel that something far bigger than a wine delay had just begun. The dining room stayed suspended in that strange silence where even the clink of a fork would sound too loud. Maya stood halfway to the staff door, turned back toward the corner, as if the single word "stop" had nailed her to the floor. Then the main doors opened. The brass handles turned, the heavy wood swung in, and two men in black suits stepped inside. They moved with the quiet coordination of people who had trained for situations more serious than delayed wine. Their eyes swept the room and settled, not on the bar or the host stand, but on the man in the worn coat at table 23. Between them walked a man in a charcoal suit, everything about him precise. The knot of his tie, the silver at his temples, the way he carried his shoulders. Elliot Crane. A few guests recognized him at once from business magazines and financial news segments. Chief Operating Officer of Aurora Meridian. He didn't acknowledge the staring faces. He walked straight to the back table and stopped in front of the old man with the untouched tea. "Mr. Haynes," he said, bowing his head just enough to be respectful, his voice carrying clearly. "You called." The name fell into the quiet and changed it. Haynes. Kenjiro Haynes, the elusive founder and CEO of Aurora Meridian Group, the man whose holdings included the entire Meridian hotel and restaurant network. The invisible owner behind the golden logo on the menus. He was the one Gregory had tried to push back out into the street. Maya's fingers curled into her palms. Gregory went paper white. Mr. Haynes," Gregory stammered, hurrying forward. I didn't realize. If someone had told us you were coming, we would have—" "Recognized me?" Kenjiro said quietly. He stood relaxed, but there was nothing soft in his eyes. "You said you didn't recognize me," he went on. "That was the one true thing you've said tonight." Gregory swallowed. "I was just trying to protect the restaurant," he rushed out. "We have a reputation to maintain. I thought you, might make guests uncomfortable. You were only weighing a person on the scale of what you thought they could spend," Kenjiro said. "You looked at my coat and decided how much respect I was worth. You decided Maya's respect was a mistake." He flicked his gaze toward her. "When she treated me as a guest instead of a problem, you punished her in public to reassure a man who snaps his fingers at your staff like they're objects." Harrington scraped his chair back and stood, straightening his cuffs. "Mr. Haynes," he said, forcing a smile. "Kenjiro, this has obviously gotten out of hand. Gregory's a bit high-strung, but he runs a tight ship. I've hosted half my key dinners here. We've been very good for your brand." He gave a practiced chuckle. "I'm sure this young woman didn't mean anything by her tone," he went on. "She's under pressure. No need to turn this into a scene. High-value clients like us keep places like this alive. You know that." The phrase "like us" hung in the air. Kenjiro turned to look at him fully. "High value," he repeated. That's how you think of yourself, Mr. Harrington? The numbers speak for themselves, Harrington said quickly. My firm spends... You spend money, Kenjiro said, cutting in. And you believe that entitles you to treat people as accessories to your evening. You snapped your fingers at a woman who has been on her feet for 10 hours and demanded she be removed from her job to protect your comfort. That's an exaggeration, Harrington protested. I expect a certain standard of service, that's all. Service, Kenjiro replied, is attention, not ownership. Not in my houses. He turned slightly toward Elliot without taking his eyes off Harrington. Elliot, he said, make a note, please. Yes, sir, Elliot answered. As of tonight, Kenjiro said, Mr. Edward Harrington is no longer welcome at any Aurora Meridian property. Hotels, restaurants, event spaces. If his name appears in our systems, reservations are to be declined, permanently. A soft intake of breath moved through the room. Harrington stared at him. You can't be serious, he said. I've brought millions through your doors. I've introduced your brand to clients all over the world. You'll lose business over a runner who doesn't know her place? Kenjiro's expression didn't flicker. If the price of your business is that my staff accept being treated like furniture, he said, then I am happy to lose it. He nodded once to the two men by the entrance. Your dinner is on me tonight, he added. It will also be your last with my name on the door. Harrington looked around, searching for support. No one moved. The faces that had once leaned toward him were now carefully neutral. A few looked down at their plates. He grabbed his coat from the back of his chair, movement suddenly awkward. This is a mistake, he muttered. You'll regret this. He walked toward the exit. The security men did not touch him. They simply opened the doors, a violent escort that said everything. When the door swung shut behind him, the room seemed to exhale. Kenjiro turned back to Gregory. And you, he said quietly, speak of protecting a reputation. Gregory flinched as if the words themselves were a blow. Maya stood near the service door, no longer sure whether she was on the inside or the outside of this place, watching the man in the worn coat who suddenly seemed to tower over his own empire. The doors had barely closed behind Harrington when Elliot's phone buzzed softly in his hand. He glanced down, nodded once, and looked back at Kenjiro. The block is in motion, sir, he said. I've flagged Mr. Harrington's profile across all Aurora Meridian properties. Hotels, restaurants, lounges, corporate spaces. His account is now marked as not welcome. Any attempt to book will be declined. A murmur ran through the room. In a world where doors quietly opened for people like Harrington, the idea of every door quietly closing was more shocking than shouting. Kenjiro inclined his head. Thank you, Elliot. Then he turned fully toward Gregory. Up close, without the glasses and the tired stoop, the difference between the old man and the man who had built the logo on the doors was undeniable. Mr. Lane, he said, his tone calm, almost conversational. You've worked here for how long? 15 years, Gregory said quickly. I've been with Meridian from the early days. I've trained staff, hosted dignitaries, protected... Protected what? Kenjiro interrupted gently. Our name, our standards, or your own position at the door? Gregory swallowed. A head waiter is a gatekeeper, Kenjiro continued. You stand here every night deciding who gets the full smile and who gets the cold shoulder, who is worth your patience and who is a problem to be pushed aside. He gestured around the room. Tonight, the only person who treated a vulnerable guest as anything more than an obstacle was Maya. You saw that as a threat because it broke your unofficial rule. Always bow to money first. That's not fair, Gregory protested, voice shaking. You came in looking like trouble. I was thinking of the other guests. I was thinking of you now, of your brand. If I had known... Kenjiro lifted a hand. That is precisely the point, he said. You only care who someone is when you think they can help or hurt you. When you believed I was powerless, you didn't just fail to recognize me as your employer. You failed to recognize me as a person who deserved dignity. Gregory's eyes were glossy now. I can learn, he said. I can do better. Give me a chance to prove. This room has had 15 years to teach you the difference between firmness and cruelty, Kenjiro replied. You chose cruelty every time the scales tipped between important client and inconvenient human being. He looked toward Elliot. Elliot, he said, his voice softening but not weakening, please ask security to escort Mr. Lane from the premises. His employment ends tonight. 1 week's pay as severance is sufficient. No further representation under the Meridian name. The two suited men stepped forward. Gregory instinctively took a step back. "Mr. Haynes, please," he said, voice cracking. "My family. I've built my whole life around this job. I was protecting what you built. Just give me one more chance. I'll attend any training, any review, Kenjiro shook his head. "Protection that crushes the wrong people is not protection," he said quietly. "It's fear, dressed up as professionalism. I don't need fear at my doors. I need honor." The guards took Gregory gently but firmly by the arms. He looked around the room, searching for someone to speak up for him. No one did. The guests he had flattered for years suddenly found their napkins fascinating. As he was guided toward the main doors, Gregory's gaze flickered to Maya. For a moment, there was something almost like bewilderment in it. How had the girl he'd just dismissed become the axis of his downfall? Then the doors closed behind him too. The restaurant exhaled. What had started as a quiet dinner service now felt like the aftermath of a storm. Kenjiro stood alone in the center of the floor for a moment, the shabby coat still on his shoulders, the metal crest glinting on the distant table. Then he turned to the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying easily, "allow me to apologize for the disruption to your evening. This is not the experience we intend to create in a house that carries my name." A few people shook their heads, murmuring that no apology was necessary. "Tonight," he continued, "your meals and drinks will be covered by the restaurant. Please relax, enjoy your courses, and treat the rest of this evening as a reminder that how we treat one another matters more than how much we spend." Some of the tension melted. A couple near the window exchanged surprised smiles. A table of business executives sat a little straighter, suddenly aware that the story of tonight would travel far beyond their receipts. Kenjiro's eyes moved past them, scanning the room, searching for one person. He found her where she had been the whole time, by the service counter, half in shadow, hands clenched at her sides, as if she still wasn't sure whether she was allowed to exist in this space. "Maya Ito," he called gently. She flinched at the sound of her full name spoken into the quiet. "Yes, sir," she managed. He walked toward her. Up close, he could see the streaks of dried tears on her cheeks, the faint indentation where her name tag pulled at the fabric of her uniform. She looked like someone standing between two cliffs with no bridge in sight. "As I understand it," Kenjiro said, "the last official action taken regarding your employment was termination, in front of an entire dining room." Her throat tightened. "Yes," she whispered. "Greg, Mr. Lane fired me." He nodded once. "Good," he said. Her eyes widened. "Good," he repeated, a hint of warmth touching his mouth. "Because that means his authority over your future ends where his title ends. And his title ended about 60 seconds ago." A faint, stunned laugh bubbled up from somewhere in the room. Maya blinked. I don't follow," she said. "Keep it simple then," Kenjiro replied. "Whatever he said, I am formally reversing. Consider yourself unfired." Her knees nearly gave out from relief, so abrupt it was almost painful. "But," he added, and the word hung between them, "I don't intend to put you back where you were, as if nothing happened. You have shown a kind of judgment that doesn't belong at the bottom, wrung forever." "I'm just a runner," she said. "I bring plates, I refill water. I wrote half my thesis on the prep counter this afternoon because it's the only quiet place I have. I don't think that qualifies me for anything more than—" "It qualifies you," he said, "for something far more important than a promotion on this floor." He glanced toward Elliot, who had stepped a respectful distance back. "Walk with me," Kenjiro said softly to Maya. "We have something to discuss that will not make sense in front of a full dining room." She hesitated, glancing automatically toward the kitchen, as if expecting someone to stop her. No one did. Every eye in the room was on her now, the same room that had watched her be fired moments ago, now watching her be invited somewhere she didn't have a name for yet. Kenjiro stepped aside, giving her the choice. After a heartbeat, Maya took a breath, left the safety of the service counter, and fell into step beside him. As they crossed the dining room toward the main doors, guests parted without being asked. Elliot and the security team followed at a discreet distance, the strange procession of a girl in an apron walking next to the man who secretly owned the world she was about to enter. No one knew yet that this short walk, past linen-draped tables and half-finished plates, was the real beginning of both of their new lives. The cold hit her as soon as the door of the Meridian Crown closed. One moment Maya was under chandeliers, the next she stood on the sidewalk in apron and kitchen shoes, Chicago wind cutting straight through her. Behind her, the restaurant windows glowed like a world she'd just been pushed out of. At the curb, a black Aurora sedan waited. The driver opened the rear door with a smooth motion. Elliot stood nearby, phone to his ear, already talking about foundation access. "Ms. Ito," Kenjiro said, "come with us." She stared at the open door, then back at the building. "I still have a shift," she blurted. "My checkout, the tip pool, my coat is in the staff room. They'll think I disappeared." "You won't be clocking back in tonight," Kenjiro replied. "Someone will retrieve your coat." He studied her, his voice softening. "And you won't be needing that hook downstairs much longer?" The words hit her harder than the wind. "So, I really am fired," she said. "Just fired into a nicer car?" A faint smile crossed his face. "Whatever Gregory announced is no longer the final word," he answered. "I'm not taking something from you, Maya. I'm asking you to hear what I want to put in its place. Let's talk where we don't have to shout over traffic and gossip." She looked once at the windows. From outside, the dining room already felt sealed and far away. She drew in a breath and climbed into the sedan. The leather seat caught her gently. Soft interior lights traced the doors. The city noise dropped to a low hum when the door shut. Kenjiro sat opposite her. Elliot took the front passenger seat, and the car slid into traffic. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Maya looked down at her hands, red from hot plates, at the faint stains on her apron. "This is usually where I wake up at the service station," she said quietly. "Someone yelling about water glasses." "If this were a dream," Kenjiro replied, "I'd have chosen a more dramatic coat." "Maya," he said after a moment, "I didn't bring you here to list your mistakes. I brought you here because of what you did right." She frowned. "I poured tea and got fired for it," she said. "That doesn't feel very right." "You did more than pour tea," he answered. "You noticed a crest nobody else saw. You didn't ask about money or status. You bowed. In a noisy dining room, with your manager watching, you chose respect over convenience." She remembered the small disc hitting the table, the shape of the flower, her professor's lecture on family emblems. "I just followed what I've been studying," she murmured. "If you recognize a symbol like that, you acknowledge it." "Most people look away," he said, "especially when noticing might cost them." He glanced at the blurred buildings outside, then back at her. "Aurora has a cultural arm," he said. "On paper, it's a foundation. In practice, it's a very expensive warehouse. We own a collection of Japanese art. Screens, prints, ceramics. They're cataloged, insured, stacked in climate control. Almost no one sees them." Maya's head lifted. "I think I cited that collection," she said, "in my thesis. Privately held, limited access. I wasn't sure it even existed." "It exists," besides, Kenjiro said. "What doesn't really exist is the soul it was supposed to protect. I built a company that is very good at counting. Then I handed the part tied to my mother's world to people who only speak in numbers." His jaw tightened. "They see cracks as flaws to hide," he said quietly. "She taught me the cracks are the story. I'm a grad student who writes about those stories," she said, "and a server who refills water. That's a long way from deciding what happens to a collection like that. I already have people who know how to run budgets and write reports," Kenjiro replied. "I don't have many who bow to a crest in the worst seat of a restaurant, knowing their manager disapproves." He leaned forward slightly, gaze steady. "I'm dissolving the current foundation board," he said. "We're going to build a public space for that collection, restore pieces properly, open them to more than a guest list. I need someone at the center who understands both research and reverence." He let that hang between them. "In the way you made tea and bowed tonight," he added, "I saw more leadership than I've seen in some people with director on their door." Maya swallowed. "Are you offering me a job?" she asked. "An actual job, not polishing glass in the back?" "I'm saying," Kenjiro replied, "that I see the possibility of a future director where you see just a student in an apron. And I'm asking if you're willing, at least, to consider that your life might reach further than the service station at the Meridian Crown." Outside, Chicago's night slid past in streaks of light on the glass. Inside the quiet car, a girl in kitchen shoes and a man in a worn coat sat facing each other, knowing that by the time the sedan stopped, they would not be able to step back into their old roles as if nothing had changed. The car moved through the city in near silence. Maya sat stiffly in her seat, still in her apron and worn shoes, hands clenched together in her lap. Kenjiro watched her for a moment. "I won't talk in circles," he said. "Tonight wasn't an accident. I was testing more than a restaurant. I was testing people, and now I need to tell you what I decided." She tried to make her voice steady. "About me?" she asked. "About you," he said, "and about a position I want you to take." Her laugh came out thin. "You mean at the foundation?" she said, "filing documents, carrying crates?" "I mean leading the new public space around our Japanese collection," he replied. "Overseeing the pieces, guiding restoration, designing exhibitions, speaking with museums here and overseas. In effect, the role is director." The words seemed to hang between them. "Director," she repeated. "I'm a grad student who serves bread and wipes spills. You are also the only person in that room who saw me as a guest when you thought I had nothing," Kenjiro said. "That matters more to me than a list of fellowships." She shook her head quickly. "You should call someone from the Louvre," she said. "Or the Met. People who've already done this. If you put me there and I fail, I don't just embarrass myself. I damage your foundation. Your mother's name. I can't gamble with that." He tilted his head. "Whose future are you really afraid of gambling?" he asked. The answer came quietly. "My mom's," she said. Her shoulders dropped as if she'd finally set down a bag. "She has Parkinson's," Maya went on. "Some days are good. Some days she can't stop shaking. The medication, the therapy, the visits, they all pile up. Every shift I work goes to rent, tuition, her treatment. There is no extra. None. If I leap into something big and I crash, we don't have a backup plan. We have overdue notices." She looked down. "So, when you say opportunity, I hear risk that could cost her health," she said. "You need someone whose failure doesn't wipe out their family." "For flawless resumes, I have a full cabinet," he replied. "What I rarely find is someone willing to stand next to a person everyone else ignores and, in the same night, draw a line when a rich man snaps his fingers at her." He turned the small metal crest in his hand. "You recognize this," he said. "You bowed to it, not because you knew who I was, but because you respected what it represented. Then you respected yourself enough to tell a powerful customer to speak to you properly. That combination, respect outward and respect inward, is what I need guarding that collection." Maya gave a small, tired smile. "Respect doesn't pay neurologists," she murmured. "No," he said. "Which is why I refuse to let that be the thing stopping you." He took a breath. "When you bowed tonight," he continued, "I asked my chief of staff to learn the facts of your situation, not gossip, numbers, real constraints." She stiffened. "You had someone check on me?" she asked. "On my mother?" "I asked him to see what your manager never bothered to," Kenjiro replied. "That your mother, Naomi, is at Lakeshore Neurological. That there is a large unpaid balance on her account. That her doctors are recommending a new treatment plan your current income cannot realistically cover." Tears rose instantly. "That's extremely personal," she whispered. "It is," he said. "So, I'll be just as personal in what I offer back." He laced his fingers. "If you accept this role," he said, "Aurora's medical program will take over your mother's care, the existing debt, the current bills, the new therapy, at Lakeshore or any equivalent clinic she and her doctors choose, for as long as she needs it." She stared at him. "All of it?" she asked. "Not just for a year, not just until a budget changes?" "All of it," he repeated. "Call it a signing bonus measured in years instead of numbers on a check." Her breath caught. "And if I say yes and I'm not good at it?" she asked. "If I freeze in meetings, if I make mistakes, does she lose everything because I wasn't enough?" He shook his head. "Your mother's care is not a leash I yank when I'm disappointed," he said. "Once it is in place, it stays. You are allowed to learn, to struggle, to improve. Her treatment is not conditional on perfection. I am not buying your fear. I'm buying you room to grow." That sentence cracked something inside her. She turned away, pressed both hands over her face, and the tears finally broke through. Not the quick, hidden ones she'd swallowed in staff bathrooms, but deep, shaking sobs that seemed to carry every anxious calculation she'd done over a kitchen sink. Kenjiro didn't touch her. He picked up a small box of tissues from the console and slid it toward her. She took a handful blindly, shoulders still trembling. "I'm sorry," she managed between breaths. "This is a lot." "It is," he agreed. "That doesn't mean you're not capable of receiving it." Slowly the sobs faded. She wiped her face, sniffed, and managed a crooked, embarrassed smile. "This is not how I pictured a director looking," she said. "This is what someone looks like," he replied, "when a weight they thought was permanent finally moves." He turned the crest once more, the etched flower catching the soft dashboard light. "When you bowed to this," he said, "you honored my mother's world without knowing her name. You honored the part of me I was told to hide to survive. Tonight, I'm choosing not to hide it anymore. You helped me do that." He closed his hand around the metal. "The least I can do," he said, "is treat your mother's life with the same seriousness." Maya looked up, eyes still red but steadier. "So, if I say yes," she said quietly, "I'm not risking her health. I'm just stepping into something bigger than I thought I was allowed to have." "Exactly," he said. "The only thing in danger is your comfort. And comfort has never been where people like you do their best work." She drew in a long breath and let it out slowly. The fear in her chest was still there, but it no longer felt like a trap. It felt like a door. And for the first time, she could imagine walking through it on purpose. For a moment, the only sound in the car was the low hum of the engine. Maya watched the city sliding by, then looked back at the crest in Kenjiro's palm. "I keep asking myself the same thing," she said softly. "Why would anyone change someone's whole life over a napkin, a glass of water, and a bow? It doesn't add up." He closed his hand around the metal disc. "It does," he answered, "if you know what those things meant to the person sitting at that table. When I put on that coat tonight," he said, "I wasn't playing dress-up. I felt like the man I looked like, tired, replaceable, standing on top of a tower that would keep the turning even if I vanished. My doctor talked to me about stress and risk. He never once mentioned whether anything I've built feels worth staying for." Maya's chest tightened. "So, you went to the restaurant to decide?" she asked. "I went to see what my world really is when nobody knows I'm watching," he replied. "And I saw it. Beautiful, efficient, and utterly cold. A staff trained to bow to money and step over anyone who doesn't look profitable. A room full of people who know my logo but would shove past me if they thought I was in the way." He opened his hand again. The crest caught the dashboard light. "This," he said, "was the last piece I kept from my mother. She mended broken pottery and told me the cracks were the most honest part. After she died, my father told me to hide everything she was if I wanted to survive in finance. So, I did. I became very good at hiding." He met Maya's eyes. "Tonight I was ready to let that hidden part die quietly with me," he said. "Let the lawyers feed Aurora to a faceless trust and be done with it." He gave a small, humorless smile. "And then you walked over," he said. "Not because you recognized me, because you saw an old man who hadn't even been given water. You spread a clean cloth on a table no one wanted. You poured tea the way she would have approved of. You saw this crest and, instead of asking what it was worth, you honored what it meant." Maya swallowed. "I was just trying not to look away," she murmured. "Exactly," he said. Everyone else was very busy looking away. Outside, the car slowed. Ahead, the black glass face of Aurora Meridian Tower rose into the night, the logo glowing near the top. The driver pulled under the canopy and stopped. "This is us," Kenjiro said quietly. "Where all of this becomes real or stays a story we told in a car." The driver opened Maya's door. Cold air brushed her face. She stayed seated a second longer. "Mr. Haynes," she said, turning to him, "I meant what I told you. I don't know how to run a museum or talk to donors. I'll need help with almost everything." "I would worry if you thought you didn't," he replied. "But I do know how to learn," she said. "I know what that crest stands for. I know what it feels like when people look through someone instead of at them. And I believe the cracks in a story can be the most beautiful part if you treat them right." Her voice steadied. "If you trust me with this," she said, "I can't promise I'll never be scared, but I can promise I won't treat it like a trophy. I won't betray the trust you're giving me, and I won't betray the memory of your mother's work. For a heartbeat, his expression was unreadable. Then something gentle broke through. "Ms. Ito," he said, using the name tied to her Japanese grandfather, "I have spent a lifetime putting my name on buildings. Tonight is the first time I feel like any of it might honor hers." He slipped the crest back into his pocket and opened his door. "The honor," he said, stepping out, "is mine." They walked toward the entrance side by side. Glass doors parted, releasing warm light over marble floors and high ceilings. The Aurora logo shone on the far wall. Somewhere above, empty rooms waited to become archives and galleries filled with stories that had been boxed away for years. "You're really doing this," Maya said as they crossed the lobby. "Yes," he replied. "And tomorrow, we start figuring out how." Their footsteps faded toward the elevators, and the camera of our attention pulls back. A few hours ago, an old man in a worn coat was told he didn't belong in a dining room. A young woman in an apron was treated as disposable. Their worth was measured in outfits and income, in how quickly they could be replaced. But the future of an entire empire shifted because one person refused to see a stranger as less than human. One glass of water, one carefully brewed cup of tea, one bow of respect, given when nothing was guaranteed and no one important was watching. That was enough to wake up a heart that had nearly closed and to open a door she never knew existed. Thank you for traveling with Maya and Kenjiro tonight. If their story touched you, tell us in the comments. Have you ever seen someone judged by their appearance and prove everyone wrong? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Beyond Stories, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still has power. And if your heart is ready for another journey, there's one waiting on the screen right now about another simple choice that turns a life around. Click it, get comfortable, and let the next story begin.